Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Faith and Finance Forum, hosted by the Catholic Finance Association and presented by Aquinas Wealth Advisors. We have a great show for you today. We have Joe Falcao with us. How are you, Joe?
I'm fine, John. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Shall we start with a prayer? In the name of the
Absolutely,
Father,
always.
Son, Holy Ghost. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now at the hour of our death.
Amen.
Amen. Saint Thomas, pray for
Pray for
us.
us.
Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Well,
Also,
Joe,
Saint Thomas More, pray for us as well.
well, yeah, in this case, Saint Thomas the Apostle, who went to India, of course.
Absolutely.
We should always remember Thomas More. I won't disagree with that one bit. Well, Joe, it's so good to see you, my friend. You and I have been friends for many years, and it's a real privilege to have you on the Faith and Finance Forum today. You're really just a perfect fit for this show. You're a devout Catholic. You're an accomplished business executive and entrepreneur, and you've led people in business for many decades. You're also a great family man, and just generally speaking, a nice guy. So I'm looking forward to getting to know you better in this interview and sharing our friendship with our many listeners and viewers. A couple fun facts about Joe. Right now, he's serving as CFO at Orva, but he's had a ton of great experience before that. We're going to get into a lot of that. He's been married to Cheryl for 25 years. He proposed in 1 week, and we're going to learn more about that in a minute. He's lived in 7 different countries. He has 5 children, and he built his family alongside his international job. 2 of his children were born in Belgium, and 3 of them were born in the United States. Very interesting. Joe, how are you today? It's good to see you.
It's nice to see you in person, and I truly enjoyed meeting you 3 weeks ago in New York City. So my meeting was running late. I said I need to go and see what John is doing here in New York City.
Oh man, Joe, I'm so glad you came. Joe came to our big event at Mutual of America. Got to meet Kelly Evans after our Wall Street Women of Faith event. And I'm just glad you were able to pop in for a few minutes, Joe. You're such a busy guy. And Joe's doing a lot more business in New York City. So a lot of our viewers and listeners in the city, please note that Joe is available for meetings and coffee and going to daily mass in the city, which is awesome. So, Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you grew up, where you came from, anything you want to open up with.
Absolutely. So one of the toughest question that someone asked me is from where I'm from, because there are 3 ways of cutting that. Is where I live with my family, which is Holliston, Mass. Which passport do I carry, which is US. I'm very proud American for the past 12 years. Or where I was born. So I was born in Kenya, in East Africa. My father was running the safari parks in Kenya. If anyone knows the safari parks, the games, the helicopters. So he was running that. I spent 4 years of my life there. Then I spent 3 years of my life in a former Portuguese colony where St. Thomas almost went, but St. Francis was there in the 1500s, called Goa, GOA. After that, we had a small stint, and I can explain the movements in Spain. After that is where I was raised, and I adopted the culture and the mindset. I was raised in Brazil, São Paulo. Spent almost 20 years there. Then the company moved me to the US, a chemical company. Then I went to Malaysia, then Belgium, then back in the US. I think it sums up to 7 countries. One of the best things I found, and I'm very grateful, is in every one of these countries, I was able to experience the Catholic faith, the church in action. Different expressions, but I was able to experience that. Example of extremes, the churches in South America full, as you may imagine. The church in Malaysia, it had predefined times, controlled by the government, and I had to find the location. I didn't have a car, so I had to ask someone to drop me there, etc. So it's a unique experience. And going for masters in China when I was traveling there, in Japan, etc. So it's every day I'm very grateful to what I was able to touch and see worldwide.
And Joe, you and I recently discussed your family's history, which is fascinating. You're able to trace it back to 1580, I believe. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so one of the things I'm trying to do is, so my family, as you may imagine, is spread across the world. And I was trying to understand the roots and origins, certainly going back. Generally, I don't like to go back too much, look forward. And I asked one of my cousins, I said, when my family converted to become Catholic? He said he could trace it back to 1580. So basically the the Jesuits went to India and started converting families. So my family was one of them, and they converted in 1580. Although this is a nice social fact, each one of us has a unique conversion story. Is how we have the encounter and how we sort of drive our life.
So, Joe, talk to us a little bit about the Catholic Church in India. How large is it? How big of a part of that country's culture is it? Just give us some high level pieces we should know about the Catholic Church in India.
So India has roughly 1 billion people. 1%, 1 to 2% are Catholics. So there are many pockets across the country that have a strong Catholic formation. And I say, in Boston, I was in the Catholic seminary in Brighton, and I have to tell them that that region exports Catholic priests. But the thing I realized in the Catholics in India, once they get deep into the faith, the entire town or village gets converted. So there are a few cities around the country which have a strong Catholic dominance. The Catholic schools are doing in India what they did across the world, which is schools and hospitals, so helping socially the country. Every non-Catholic who is a business person, generally they send their kids to Catholic school because of the formation. They have very rigorous formation, etc. So it's the fourth point, the Catholic Church in India, like in certain parts of Africa and in Asia, is being attacked by depending who is controlling the government. So it's something folks may want to pray about, is how we can strengthen the smaller countries where few faithful are trying to keep the faith strong.
Joe, one of the very interesting things about you is that you can claim a background in a lot of different places. You were born in Africa, India, of course, Brazil. You've lived in many other different countries. That's one of the beautiful things about our faith, though, right? Is that in each of these places you have a home in the Catholic Church. Have you experienced that during your travels and during your life?
No, absolutely. So, a few anecdotes here. When I worked for a chemical company, Cabot Corporation in Boston, I had to go to Japan, and I was landing there on Ash Wednesday. So I emailed the general manager of Japan. I said, I'm a Roman Catholic. I need to go for Mass. Can you find a Catholic church for me? And he was impressed because no one had asked him that. They asked for other stuff that you may imagine, but I asked for that. So I went to a Franciscan church, Tokyo, and I attended Mass in English. In other parts of the world, once I was traveling in China and asked the GM that it was reporting to me, I said, Ricky, we are here this weekend. I need to go for Mass. Can you find a church in Shanghai? He said, Joe, yes, I found a church. I said, no, that's not a Catholic church. It's a Christian church. We need a Catholic church. So then he found it. And he was there with me for 2 hours. The Mass was so long, 7 a.m. till 9. The Mass was in Chinese. But the beauty of your faith is, we know the sequence, right? Stand, sit, kneel. We know the sequence. So, and we know what's happening during Mass. So you can, and the extent of our faith is not limited to one zip code. It's goes beyond that.
And Joe, I know this is kind of like a generalization, but in all your travels, where did you find the faith to be the strongest and the most vibrant? And where did you see it, perhaps a little bit more lacking? I know these are general questions, but just any color on that.
The example I gave before we started, that's attending Mass at the airport yesterday when I was coming back. So suddenly there were 20 people there, and different generations. There were many young folks there. So in that moment, I said, wow, this is the same beauty of what I experienced the day before, which was at the Basilica of Notre Dame, beautiful church, packed, etc. I said, wow, this is beautiful as well. The place where I found the church slightly relaxed was when I was in Europe, in Belgium. The most beautiful churches you can imagine. However, it was like this 20% occupied. And it's very painful for the priests and other folks. And that says, yeah, in certain points, you have to go back what the first apostles have done to rekindle the faith.
Joe, your faith is so strong and you're so on fire. Have you always been like that, or has it kind of waxed and waned throughout your life?
Generally, when I meet a rule of thumb I have is meeting good people and faithful people. So being very, not in a bad way, but being selective of who I meet. So having met folks like you, John, it helps my faith because I know you're very strong, professional, great family that you're raising, and very faithful. So meeting folks like you, it helps me because it raises the bar. I'm slightly competitive, so it raises the bar for me. So I need to be more faithful, more intense in what I'm doing, more thoughtful.
You know, Joe, your family is a huge part of your life. You've been married a long time. You have 5 children. Talk to us a little bit about family and what your wife and your children mean to you.
I mean, I centered my career, at times I had to slow down my careers because I wanted to focus on them and protect them. So it's a key priority. And once, early in my career, when I was in my early 20s, I met an executive who was he was sick he was in a hospital. So I met with him. I said, can you give me any advice of what to do? He said, you'll have many highs and lows. In the highs, everyone will be surrounding you. When you have lows, no one will be with you. Let's make sure when you die, you have family and friends that will be with you. Jobs will come and go, titles will come and go. So you have to make sure that when you end a journey, you have helped many folks to achieve what they want to achieve.
Wow. And what about, raising family and living with family in other parts of the world? I mean, what was that like? For instance, in Belgium, having your 2 children there, compare that to your life in the United States. Was it easier, harder, about the same? And just, that's a very unique feature that you have, Joe, that you've lived in a lot of different parts of the world and you've raised your family in different parts of the world. Just comment on that if you could.
Yeah, so in certain points in life, everyone has to make a choice of what to do. So I had a choice of raising my family in Belgium, if I wanted to stay there, or coming back to the US. The decision I made was to come to the US, and the reason was the same premise when I moved to the US 26 years ago. US is a beautiful country, tremendous freedom, and very accepting of everyone. Belgium is not at that stage yet. It's a beautiful country. It has great food, but when you have a life, you're raising a family, you don't have the same openness like the US. So you have to look at forward and see what's beneficial for the family in terms of opportunities, being embedded in the society, etc. So that's why we left Belgium and came back via Cabot Corporation to the US.
It sounds like that might be a source of your strong patriotism too. Being a man that's seen a lot of the world, lived in different parts of the world, it sounds like you appreciate more than perhaps most, especially those that haven't traveled as much, the beauty and gifts that the United States bestows. Would I be
And
right about that?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, it's like when I lived in Brazil, one of the things we had to carry every time we were on the street was a piece of ID and money, just in case anyone approached. And coming to the US, I sense a tremendous freedom just to walk and do, I mean, nothing bad, just enjoy and walk and do things. Things changed after September 11th. But before that, the sense of freedom was tremendous. And this is part of how the country was founded. And I feel this a tremendous obligation I have to get more involved and help the fabric of the US, not as a birth child, but as adopted son. So in the process of becoming American citizen, this phrase is engraved in my soul. All of you are adopted children of the US.
Wow, so beautiful. Joe, you have had such an incredible run as a corporate executive and as an entrepreneur. Talk to us a little bit about how you got your start professionally. Did you always want to be, a businessman and an entrepreneur? I mean, like, what were your dreams when you were growing up?
So I had 3 dreams when I was growing up, and this comes from my father, which I basically mentioned in the beginning of the call. The first one my father gave me was a high level of sense of integrity. Sort of do the right thing and sort of be a man of integrity. Don't bend to things which are not right. The second one is dare to dream, think differently, different ways of approaching the same problem. And the third one was a global citizen, sort of look at the world globally, look at things globally. Don't be paralyzed in one corner of a situation, of a problem, or physically. So these three things were part of who I am and how I was raised. And these were the ideas my father gave me as legacy when I was 8, 10 years. He passed away when I was 18, but he didn't leave, and I didn't expect that wealth. But he gave me these three ideas that were and are the cornerstone of my life and are of my kids now. So in terms of background, taking these three principles, I studied economics and I studied computer science. And both of them I was able to study at the same time with full scholarship and in the top universities in South America. After that, I got a job. My heart was taking me to work in finance because after studying economics, but at the time my father had passed away and the jobs in the banks were not paying so well. So I got a job blending these two roles, these two academic degrees to work in IT, in technology. And what drove me to work in this company was the CIO of the company that hired me. She said, I want to hire so-called smart people that can understand this business and transform this business. And I like the way of thinking, transforming, not creating screens or reports or fancy data structures, but doing that, but also transforming the company, make it more agile, etc. After I met with her, as inspiring leader, she made an offer on the spot after the interview. And I said, it was the right thing for me to do. Fun anecdote, if you anytime read the book of John Paul II, he worked during the Second World War at a factory, that he was kneeling down and praying at the factory. Yeah, that factory's name is Solvay, the same one I worked many years later. I'm not trying to claim or make any dots, just to relate the company. So every time you drink anything of plastic in nature, the raw material of this comes from the factory worldwide at Solvay. We are a Belgian company, is to manufacture. So I worked for them for 8.5 years in South America, 6 years in technology, then 2 years in the South American treasury function. At that point in time in my life, I was getting sadly asking the question, what should I do? What's my purpose? And I said, I have a dream of becoming a global citizen. One of the three things I learned from my father. And I said, how can I solve for this? And one day I wrote everything which I was dreaming, and I saw what our Lord was solving for. And you'll see the funny jokes he played with me. So this is the first one to come. So I asked the CEO of Solvay in South America, I said, can I have a global career? I said, I have a European passport. My second nationality is Portuguese. I can go to Belgium, work there. And he said, no, it's very expensive to move someone as an expat. He said, no, we are not supporting that. I said, I can work, I'll pay everything, backpack, work there, buy a nice suit and work. He said, no, we're not supporting that. So I decided to pray. And I said, I have three options. One is stop dreaming. The second one is for me to go to Europe and work. But I said, going in the stage where I was in my mid to late 20s, it's tough to get into the corporate ladder. You have to prove yourself, etc. Or I can find an American company in South America and apply for the job. I said, let me just move on. Then at that time, they didn't have Monster.com was not in play, as you imagine, in the late 90s. I bought a newspaper. I was flipping through the newspaper on a Sunday. There was a beautiful ad on March 19th, the feast day. And it was to hire someone in finance in South America for an American company. The backdrop of that is the CFO of Cabot Corp wanted to hire someone in South America to help him transform the finance organization. So I went to the interview process. I got a job. I left Solvay. I was very grateful to them, etc. And I started commuting to Boston once a month, 1 week, 2 weeks at a time, etc. Then after 4 months, they made me an offer in the same year to come to the US. And I had to start here on January 6th. And it was snowing, etc. when I landed in Boston. And I left a nice, warm, tropical country. But I said, there's something here, it has to be done.
So interesting. So I mean, and that's really been the story of your career, right? I mean, like startups, entrepreneurship, coming in and shaking things up. That's a big part of your profile, right, Joe?
Yeah, it is. It's much more opening the door and see what we can do differently. Like it's what I do first with myself, then what I do with my family, and what I do when I'm in a business or non-profit situation.
What were some of the, big accomplishments or just, interesting breakthroughs you had early in your career? Was there an episode that stuck out that you were like, wow, I'm really making the kind of impact in business that I want to?
Yeah, so there are a few things. One, when I worked for a telecom company in Boston, so the company was $1.3 billion in revenues, like many other companies out there. And looking at the profile of the revenues and margins, there were many toxic revenues, meaning loss-making revenues. So once you shave off all the toxic revenues, you will have a profitable business. So one is getting the facts, other one is sort of trimming out, very complex way of trimming out about $400 million in toxic revenues. And that included a lot of convincing, a lot of charitable conversations, some tough conversations to help decrease this revenue structure. That's the first one. The second one of the companies, not to be disclosed, wanted to outsource about 30% of the employees overseas. And everyone was supporting that because the board had asked. And when I ran the math, I said, this doesn't make sense. One, financially, because you need an entire support system. You need to make sure the quality of the service is preserved. And also, what's the morale for the rest of the employees? So I was able to convince the CEO not to do that. I said, this is the right thing for the business and the employees, not to. It's easy to say yes, always, if someone above you is asking, but you have to stop and ponder, see or look at things holistically. That was one of the most daring things I had to do. I mean, there were other instances where folks were asking to protect the bonuses, which I said, I'm not doing that. And this was when I had few kids. And with kids, there's a fixed cost embedded. And I said, I'm not doing that. But
wow. Joe, I do want to drill down on that a little bit because I know that you and I both have affinity for St. Thomas More, the man for all seasons, who was the king's servant but God's first. It sounds like you've had a few episodes in your career where you've had to swim upstream a little bit, stand up for your morals and what you believed was right, even in situations where it might cost you. Do I have that right, Joe?
yes, you have that right. My neck is still intact, though.
For now.
No, for now.
Joe,
So yeah.
how much does integrity mean to you? I mean, like in business. I mean, like talk to us about it. Like, everybody says it does, but I get the sense with you that it really, really does. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I know it means everything. So, John, I'm managing the dash. The dash means the day I was born and the day I'm going to die. So it's simple as that. And I need to make sure the day I die, the legacy I leave is intact. This doesn't imply you have to say yes to everyone. You can have tough conversations, but it means that you're making yourself aware of integrity. The awareness means you're studying things, understanding, and you're asking questions. And there's nothing at the end of the day, you have to be in peace with your soul, and you sleep and wake up in the morning and you're in peace. So that's priceless. There's nothing you can sort of compromise for that.
Joe, another quality that you possess, and anyone that knows you would agree, you just you love people, and you're a super connector. You know people all around the world. You have many friends, many acquaintances. That's a big part of who you are too, right? You just have a passion for making new friends, making new business relationships, connecting people. Talk to us a little bit about that.
It's something I learned is the art of getting out of myself and helping others, and see how we can build up a better sort of society or better group or community, etc. As Catholics, we have been asked to just go out and talk to people. So things happen beyond the four walls of any church. It's in the street that we're meeting people and helping them and sort of talking to them, etc. So, and at times when we wear jackets or ties, etc., our street is in the corporate offices, the boardrooms, etc.
And this is interesting, and we've talked about this a lot on the Faith and Finance Forum, and I'm glad that you've done a lot of this, Joe. There's many people out there that think that when they go into the office or into their, their corporate life, that they have to kind of, separate themselves from their Catholicity, perhaps practice the faith on Sunday when it comes to Mass, but during the week, not necessarily reveal that part of themselves so much. You take the opposite tack. You think that your business life and your professional identity are very much opportunities to share the faith. Talk to us a little bit about how you make that work.
It's having a unity of life or integrated life. So with the same outlook I have with my family, with Cheryl and the kids, is the same one I'll have in business. And also learning to respect the human person, independent of their faith. The human person, respect them and help them where they are in their journey. Is not to tell them that this is the proper way of doing things, but just listening and helping them where they are in their journey. So there are few incidents of people I worked with, and it was the right time to tell them they had to go for confession because they were dying. And they called and thanked me, and they wanted to meet with me before they died. So if St. Thomas More was alive, he could have been in the middle of New York City or middle of Boston type thing.
And Joe, conversely, maybe just to alleviate the fears and concerns that some of our viewers and listeners might have you ever had a situation where a colleague said, Joe, I'm not comfortable with you expressing your Catholic faith. This doesn't feel right to me. I'd really prefer if you toned it down. Has that ever happened? I mean, has that been a concern in the past?
No, it never happened to me. I'm charitable and I don't get on people's face in terms of like images of the crucifix, etc. That it's who I am. Like in a secular world, if someone roots for the Red Sox or Yankees, you display that because you value that, and that's who I am. So I value the beauty of the Catholic Church, and if someone wants to know more of me, they'll learn about that. So like folks in business know that on Sunday mornings I go for Mass. So if there's a conference call because of a deal is closing, Sunday morning I'm out with my family, and that's known. I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm just trying to show the reality and what I value.
And do you think that your strong faith has given you any advantages as a corporate executive, somebody trusted with management of assets, management of people? Do you believe that your strong faith and everything that goes along with that has given you advantages?
Yes, but no one perceives that. No one gave me a job because I was a Catholic. They gave me a job because of what they perceived I could have done for them, and they kept me with a bi-weekly payroll for the value I was giving them. It's business, and it's not because of the Catholic credentials I may carry or not.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at more so is kind of in the hard parts of leadership, in the tough decisions you've had to make, in the personnel choices you've had to make when you've been responsible for teams. These are decisions where issues of integrity, issues of ethics, concern for the human person, a lot of the topics that we talk about a lot in the Catholic faith, they come into those heavy. Do you think in those tough moments, in those just that any leader would recognize, where you're wrangling with a really tough decision, do you believe that your faith has given you an edge?
The answer is yes. So in one of the dealings in the financial world, one of the top players mentioned clearly to the CEO that he wanted Joe involved because Joe is a Catholic and he'll be honest.
That must have made you feel great.
Yeah, it was. Then I said, "Wow, the bar is high after after become a stronger Catholic here."
So, talk to me a little bit about your time at Thrasio. I think you were employee number 5, right? You were kind of at the ground floor of that.
Yeah, I was employee number 5. It's I met casually the founders of the company, which I'm very grateful for, Josh and Carlos, and they showed me the slides of what they were trying to do for the company and get into the space. So basically, the space is there are many roll-ups in different industries. So what they started, they were the founders of this, is the roll-up with Amazon third-party sellers. They found there was a value to be created. There was an arbitrage. So they started this business. And being the employee number 5, it's being part of a rocket ship being built. So we were working behind an office, Dunkin' Donuts store. There was a small storage room. We were working there. Then scaling the business. When I left, we had acquired about 300 companies.
Wow.
Designed a treasury system with 800 banks. Globally, I was not fully versed in terms of commerce tax, sales tax, VAT in different countries. Sort of when you start building up a company, you have to build up the processes, but you have to think differently at a high level, and also you have to log into the banks, get the statements, make sure there are no outliers, etc. So it was a great journey. 3.5 years, I lost 20 pounds. And we scaled the company from 5 to about 1,400 employees. So it's
unreal. I mean, how did you do it? I mean, what
no,
was the driver?
The driver was hiring great people, and the credit goes to the entire leadership team that did that. Hiring great people, and then they hire great people, etc. And also managing an e-commerce company is not as easy as the customers click and buy. You have to make sure the products get there. You make sure that you have enough advertisement awareness to drive the customers to that brand and click. There's a bit of a science around this now. So the beauty of these co-founders is they started with the C-suite, then they went down. So by the C-suite and being hands-on in designing everything they needed, then they could hire the second, third level, etc. Because they've done it. It was not theoretical. They did it. So that was a beautiful journey. At times, you hang out with people you love and enjoy. That was the case. The human dimension was fantastic.
Joe, if it was the people that made that explosive growth possible, I'm curious, when you were going from 5 to 50 to 100 to 500, how did you make sure that you were still bringing in the very high quality people, both in terms of their technical acumen and also their personal integrity and their cultural fit? When you're moving at that pace, how did you ensure that you were getting the right kind of people in?
One is the interview process and looking at the soft skills one may have, because we could not hire people that understood e-commerce and Amazon. We needed someone who had intellectual curiosity and also bias for action. To hire, like in my case, to hire finance folks that understood it well was very tough, because the consultants who might have understood, they were not willing to apply that to the job. Because we were designing process and systems while we were flying the plane. So,
wow. And now you're the CFO at Orva. Tell us about Orva.
So Trustio is in one spectrum of the e-commerce, this large 300 billion sort of marketplace. What Amazon does mainly is selling private label products. So great products, maybe like a pen or like a mug or like a spatula, private label. So what drives traffic is marketing awareness and also reviews. So based on the reviews, when you search for something, you pick up what's top of the list, basically, and you go to the buy box and you buy it. What Orva does with elegance is selling branded products, like branded sneakers, Skechers, Brooks, Bionic, etc. So the customer knows what they want to buy, and the size and the color. And also Orva has exclusive designs of what they are selling from the manufacturer.
And Joe, you've always balanced all these high-level positions, all these demanding jobs, with giving back, leadership in organizations, philanthropy, etc. Talk to us about some of the causes you're passionate about.
So one of them was slightly casual, was someone interviewed, I think a week or two ago, Andreas Widmer. So one day I met Andreas Widmer and I said, Andreas, I need to help and give back. Huh? I said, I want to help the church. I said, I'm helping fix companies, grow companies, etc., transform companies. But I see the church with certain degree of problems, good problems. So he said, yeah, Joe, let me give a thought. And then after a month, he calls me. He said, Joe, what about being on the board of the Catholic Seminary in Boston, in Brighton, St. John's? I said, it's a great idea, but do you think I'm worth of that? I'm just a normal guy. He said, I just dropped your name and they'll call you tomorrow. So I spent 6 years as a trustee at the board. And my role there was basically asking the tougher questions, providing solutions, and looking what the seminary will be 5 and 10 years from now, and what legacy we wanted to keep, having in mind that the seminary is forming the future of the Catholic Church. So solid, faithful young man to the priesthood. So that was my my perspective. And also I said, if I'm on the board and there are a few men in black, meaning priests and bishops and cardinal, I said, I'm one of them. And we have the same mission here, which is asking the right questions and protecting the seminary. So that's what I did for 6 years.
You know, Joe, you've mentioned a couple of times, asking the tough questions, and I've had a number of people come up to me after a meeting, the dreaded meeting after the meeting, right, where they say, oh gosh, blah blah blah, and I always say, hey, how come you didn't say this in the meeting? And they're like, well, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, I don't want to, rock the boat too much, I don't want, they're afraid that they'll become the problem if they raise tough questions, if they raise, issues that need to be addressed, that ultimately they'll be saying, oh, that guy's always complaining, he's always bringing up negative stuff or whatever. Talk to us about how you strike the balance between asking the tough questions, which need to be asked, which you mentioned a couple times you do, and perhaps not falling into that trap of being, oh, hey, he's just a complainer, he's a negative Nancy, etc. We can talk about that dichotomy a little bit.
Yes. So when I say I ask tough questions, it's fact-based.
Yeah.
And sort of depicting that, not person-centric. So detaching these two elements from that.
Have you ever had to turn around a failing company or been
Yes.
involved with that? Okay.
Yeah, the company which I mentioned that had a lot of toxic revenues, that was stopping the bleeding and try to build up the essence of the company with new verticals of business.
Is that harder than starting a new company?
It's harder because there are many vices embedded there. So you have to understand them and help turn around. It's a starting company is a white piece of paper. You can start. If you want to double click on why it's tough to turn around a company, is just look at the trend of GE 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and 3 years ago. So the problems were there, but they started sort of becoming real when the tide lowered a bit. And maybe some folks were not strong enough to ask tougher questions.
Which is so important, as we've established. Joe, as a leader and as a person who loves people, how do you go about developing talent and character and capability in members of your team? What's your approach to that?
The first one is building up trust with the employees. The second one is understanding what 70% they like to do, they enjoy doing, and understanding the 30% they do not like to do, and having a healthy balance between these two elements. At times, it's great to expose someone to the 30% because they get out of their comfort zone and they can grow professionally. If someone does not like to have direct reports, they can work on a project where they can meet different people and help them that way.
So it sounds like a lot of it is getting to know the person,
Yeah,
realizing what her strengths, weaknesses are, preferences are, and trying to adjust a glide path based on that.
absolutely. I mean, it's sort of natural, it's the same mindset at times as raising kids for greatness,
Mm.
sort of being a mentor for other folks. So.
So, Joe, you're a man of finance and macroeconomics, our country that we both love so much. A lot of bad news right now, right? Economy's in a tough place. Inflation, wage declines, price of gas and groceries. There's just a lot of headwinds right now. The mortgage rates way up. I mean, the list goes on and on. What can be done? I mean, what's your take on all this?
I'm much more optimistic this can be fixed. The US has a tremendous resources. We just need to deploy them properly. I think a few years ago to now, there was a bit of a waste. If you just look at the supply of clothes, etc., there was a bit of a waste. I think now is the time to trim that down a bit. Another anchor for the optimism I have is when I lived in Brazil for the so-called 20 years, the inflation rate of 9%, we could have been so joyful and going to the streets and celebrating. Used to have 100% inflation a month.
Wow.
So 9%, I know 9% and 1,000 or 10,000%, it makes the economy in relative terms not aligned. You need to fix the dials. I was used to mortgage rates of, I don't know how much, like 20% a month, that thing. So it's fixable. We just need to get people in the room, the business folks, and sort of fix it in line of mind. What's the future of the US? US is a beautiful country. There's other things happening, the geopolitical angles, different countries, alliances, etc. So we just need to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, so Joe, in terms of our advantages, I mean, U.S. dollar strength is
It's unbelievable. One to
increasing.
one.
Yeah, it is unbelievable. You're right. Yeah, no, it's a good word for it. But one of the concerns though is this modern monetary theory, this notion that we can just spend money like it's like play money, right? And the country's $30 trillion in debt, et cetera. This people say, hey, it's the world's reserve currency. Let's party on. What's your attitude towards that dynamic?
Uh, Getting back to the basics of a fiscal responsibility always helps. Printing money without substance, it will hurt in the long term and not in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your take on some of the I guess alternatives to cash, that are out there? People are interested in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. Obviously, there's a lot of precious metal enthusiasts. And any comment on any of that?
It will come back though. I think the people are very anxious and nervous now. It will come back. I mean, not trying to claim that Brazil had all the solutions, but when I was in Brazil, the financial system was very advanced in terms of controls and process and systems. Folks on the call from New York may appreciate that. When I was living there 30 years ago, there was some index currencies created by the economic agent because they wanted to find something stable. So the human creativity will create something, Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrencies. They'll create something which it doesn't have a centralized power.
And you've also had a big stand in technology. That's been a big part of your career. What's your projection for that? I mean, it's kind of been a tough year for tech in a number of different areas, but where does that go? I mean, if you were a young person who, like you, was interested in computer science and tech, you did good in school, you were looking for kind of a field to go into. Is tech still the best place to be, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I hope tech evolves. One of my kids is studying data science, so I'm hopeful he'll have a great job. The tech makes the world go faster and much more nimble. So there's space for technology. About 40 years ago, would you imagine buying things online and getting the delivery to your doorstep in 2 days? That's technology. So there's boxes are moving around, robots are moving things around and shipping, make sure that John gets the right set of books so he can put on the shelf. So it's there's always a space for technology. The question is the timing, right? Of what problem is being solved, what customer unmet need is being solved.
You know, it's been interesting the past few years too, these trends around the future of work, right? So, you know, especially during the COVID time when, you know, everything kind of shifted to home offices and remote and hybrid, you know, there was a lot of, you know, perception that that was kind of the sea change. That was the fulcrum in history on this point. And from, you know, from that point forward, most white collar professional work was going to be done in a remote office. Now it seems like there's a little bit of pushback. It seems like a lot of companies, big banks, other institutions, even technology companies, are really driving people back to the workplace for a lot of reasons. What are your attitudes towards that, Joe? Are you kind of a traditionalist at this? Do you believe in remote work? Are you a hybrid guy? What do you think?
Uh, I think the companies who are pushing back folks to go to be in the office is because the folks who are granted the freedom to work from home might have not get fully engaged. Engaged meaning moving the ball, execution ball forward, and also creating communities within the workplace so they can enhance the experience. So that might be lacking. So it's very easy to say you're working from home and there's a freedom and there's lack of discipline in getting things done. It goes back to the mindset. You can work from home, you can work from anywhere as long as you have the mindset and the commitment. And I think some companies may have employees who have not demonstrated that.
Yeah, one thing you hear from a lot of executives that are trying to get people back to the offices, hey, how are my young people going to learn to present well in a meeting? How are they going to learn to you know, effectively communicate and function as a part of a team? You know, how are they going to identify the mentors that are so key to their development? I mean, you're probably sensitive to some of those concerns, right, Joe?
If folks have not, I mean, they need to have the human person interaction.
Mm-hmm.
They need to have that. They need to be able to chat with someone casually. On a
Mm-hmm.
Zoom call, it's very tough to have a conversation with someone.
Mm-hmm.
Like you and I met in person many times. I mean, you came to Boston.
Mm-hmm.
So when I text you, you text me. There's with whom you're talking with. There's a Zoom call. You know whom you're talking to. So that's those stages of building up trust and confidence may be lacking when you work remotely. It's very tough to build up that true friendship.
Mm.
I think
And
one other way of
mm,
looking at the same situation is how you can build up friendship
mm.
in a remote environment.
I'm glad you mentioned that theme of friendship too, because you talk to so many, you know, successful people, billionaires, founders of companies, et cetera, especially the ones towards the end of their life, you know, kind of in the final stages. I've never had one tell me that friendship wasn't one of the great things they treasure. You know, of course, faith is paramount. Family is right there too, but pretty close. You know, number three, number four is going to be friendship has been such a great treasure. You would agree with that, I'm sure, Joe.
Absolutely, absolutely. So somehow we were not created in a Zoom reality,
Mm.
Teams reality. So we have to find ways to have these personal encounters. Once you have that personal encounter, then it makes the work gets productive.
Joe, you've lived and worked in the same space of so many of the great corporate leaders and entrepreneurs of our time. Who are some of the well-known names in business that you respect, that you think are doing it the right way, that have novel ideas? You know, who are you drawn to?
So a couple of names. I mean, when I graduated from college, one of my cousins gave me the book of Lee Iacocca. So I read his biography, I mean, and what he was going through. I read Jack Welch, his biography, and I respected Jack for what he did, his personal journey, and what he did for GE. I had some concerns about his personal life, not to be copied. Um, I respect the daring of Elon Musk. I mean,
Mm,
his daring nature and sense of detachment.
mm.
So what I try to do is pick up snippets of people because everyone has some angles like me, many that we need to work on and improve.
How important is that daring nature that you just mentioned in regards to Elon Musk? I mean, like, so for instance, with Thracio, that just incredible growth that you were part of, you had to take risks, right? You had to be daring to achieve that type of velocity. Am I right?
No, absolutely. You have to put bets, and everyone who joined the first 12 or 15 employees, they betted in a vision
Hmm.
that it could have happened or not. But in my mind, I said it's worth the journey, the people you're along with to climb the mountain.
Hmm.
So when I worked for another company called iBasis, now when you join call 7 in Italy, you're paying fractions of a penny a minute, right?
Hmm.
20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was like dollars a minute.
Hmm.
So iBasis was the one that disrupted the telecom industry because each telecom was controlling their own country because they had captive audience of the Johns of the world. Now we have iBasis created a way for the phone calls to be cheaper. So being disruptive, being daring, asking the tough questions helps you think differently. Example, when I worked for Dunkin' Brands, Dunkin' Donuts, who could have imagined that people would buy coffee on the go and pay $2 when you can make at home for 20 cents?
But of course, it worked out. And let's get into that a little bit. Like when you're evaluating a new investment or business opportunity or a company that's asked you to jump on board, how do you work through that really consequential decision, Joe? Especially when you've been at points where you had, 5 kids to feed and other obligations. How do you work through a decision that's so consequential and so complex?
Uh, so the first part is I pray upon what I'm
Mm.
going to do. The second one is I try to track how much of fixed cost I need to pay for the next 6 months, and that defines the degree of freedom I may have to take a risk. And I try to analyze what's the worst that can happen, meaning are the skills I'm learning there being useful or not? So that's what I try to assess, and always there's an unknown. Things are not perfect. So when I made my moves across the world, it was like in a sort of in few hours or days I had to decide. It was not like months of
Wow.
research, analysis, etc. So going from one country, now it's very easy to say I live in 7 countries, but each country, each landing, each zip code, each document, each school, I mean, it was like it has a unique experience there. So
Joe, I hope that our fellow countrymen, the people, especially the younger people in the United States that are coming up and exploring how they want to spend their life, I hope they never lose that daring nature that you just described, that willingness to kind of, let it all hang out, take a risk, right? I mean, that's what it's all
absolutely,
about in life.
let's move forward. And I mean, if not, you start again, right?
Joe, let's spend a little time here as we start to wind down on really, kind of your big theme, which is evangelizing in business. I mean, that's a big part of who you are. You've had success in that. You're very very comfortable doing that. What is some of the advice that you would give to our audience, business executives and financial advisors and people that are working in the corporate world? To evangelize their peers and represent Christ in the workplace.
I think the first point, if I have to structure this, I would say they have to increase their own faith, and understand what they hear on Sundays and apply outside the 4 walls. And the 4 walls may not be pretty, no beautiful pictures. And keep on dialing up as much as they feel comfortable. And I would say 20% more than that. Get out of the comfort zone slightly. So, and let's be in peace with what they're doing. But keep on doing something.
And like you said earlier, I mean, you can be subtle about it, right? I mean, as a matter of fact, you should be subtle about it. But how do you kind of, I guess, do it in a delicate way where, the person that you become friends with, the person that you're, trying to help and serve and bring closer to the Lord, what are some of the tips you have to kind of, make it clear that, hey, my faith is a big part of who I am and I'd like to share it with you?
Um, it's one is understanding where they are in their journey, faith
Mm.
journey, and see how you can help them for the next step. Some of folks may be paralyzed, they may be hurt with the Catholic Church. Many folks in the US, in Europe, they're hurt with the Catholic Church. For many things, the church did not do so well. But the beauty of what I tell them is there's a beautiful message and product that 12 guys, mediocre 12 guys, took and they ran across the world. And there are a billion folks who are following that today. So there may be something to learn from that. And if they say, well, how can a lay person apply to what they did? I would say St. Thomas More is my hero, my lay hero that was a lay person, had all the power of the world, raised a beautiful family. And he did in his own way what was applied for the 15th century. So we have to find what can be done today using the technology means, everything else. So
Yeah, I love that, and there are practical benefits of strengthening your faith, like you've mentioned a few times in our conversation. You know, just that moral compass, that sense of what's right and wrong that served you so well in your career. You know, if you're looking for a practical benefit of strengthening your faith, that's going to come too. It's going to be easier for you to stand strong in that moment of temptation where it might be quick and easy to do the wrong thing, but you'll have that little voice in your heart and your head guiding you towards making the right decision, right?
absolutely, absolutely,
A huge tangible benefit. Well, Joe, our time is almost complete here. This has just been so much fun spending time with you
no,
today.
absolutely.
Any closing thoughts for our audience before we part ways here?
Um, I think the thing that which I learned is manage your dash very well. The date each one of us was born is defined, but the end part of the dash is not. So manage the dash properly.
And how can our audience connect with you, Joe? Do you have a website or social media presence or something like that?
I'm not as fully versed in social media like you, John. I need to learn. But folks can connect one via John. John has all my contact information. And the second one is on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm reasonably active on LinkedIn. So you can connect that way. And I'll be happy to engage in conversations and learn from folks from this audience.
And Joe, you're so modest, but you actually do post a pretty strong leadership tip weekly on LinkedIn. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I started doing that when COVID started. I was bored. I said, what can I do differently here? Let me be daring. So I think there's about 2 years
No,
worth of posting. So
it's good stuff. I mean, it's always fresh and original. And you know, folks, I mean, this Joe is very open. He's such an just an ordinary guy. I mean, just reach out to him on LinkedIn. He'll be very responsive. And remember, he's in New York quite often these days. So
every
we got
other
to get him
week I'm
out.
in that city. Yeah.
We're gonna get you out to St. Patrick's for daily mass very soon. Well, Joe, this has been such a pleasure. God bless you and your family. Thank you for your time.
Thanks
I
so
know how
much.
busy you are. It's been a real pleasure, folks. This has been the Faith and Finance Forum podcast presented by, by the Catholic Finance Association and sponsored by Aquinas Wealth Advisors. We've been talking with Joe Falcao about leadership, faith, and everything else that he's passionate about. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time on the Faith and Finance Forum.
Thanks, John.